You worked for this. 30 years, maybe 40. Early mornings and late nights and the particular exhaustion of a person who gave their best hours to something that required them and depended on them and told them in 1,000 small ways every day that they mattered. And then one day, with a card signed by colleagues and a cake from the break room and a handshake from someone in management who mispronounced your name, it was over, and you drove home, and the next morning the alarm did not go off, and you lay there in the silence of a morning that belonged entirely to you, and felt something you were not prepared to feel, not relief, not joy, something closer to falling. Because the thing nobody tells you about retirement, the thing that does not appear in any of the financial planning conversations, or the travel brochures, or the well-meaning advice from people who have not yet experienced it, is this. When the role ends, you have to find out who is left. And for some people, for more people than anyone admits, the answer to that question is uncomfortable. The Stoics had something to say about this, not because they had retirement in the modern sense, they did not, but because they spent their entire lives wrestling with the same question that retirement forces every person to finally face. Who are you when the world no longer needs you to be anything in particular? That question is what today is about, and the answer, if you are willing to stay until the end, is more powerful than anything the working years gave you. Stay with me. If you are someone who is navigating the transition into retirement and trying to figure out who you are on the other side of a career that defined you, subscribe to this channel. Every week, we go deep into Stoic wisdom through real stories that help you build a life that is genuinely, completely and without apology your own. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you never miss what comes next. Here is the thing about retirement that the Stoics would have identified immediately. It is not a financial event, it is an identity event. The money, the pension, the savings, the careful planning of decades, that is the visible part. The part that gets planned and calculated and discussed at length. What does not get discussed is what happens to the person inside the plan, because for most people who retire, especially people who gave themselves seriously to their work, who found meaning in it, who were genuinely good at it, the career was not just what they did, it was a significant part of who they were. The title, the role, the daily structure that organized their attention and gave their hours a shape and told them every morning when the alarm went off that there was somewhere to be and something to do and someone who needed what only they could provide. When that ends, gradually or suddenly, planned or not, what remains is a question that the working years kept at a comfortable distance. Who am I without this? Marcus Aurelius spent 19 years as Emperor of Rome asking a version of that question in reverse. He wrote, in the private pages of his Meditations, a journal he kept not as a record, but as a daily practice of self-examination. It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live. He was not writing about physical death. He was writing about the life that goes unlived, when a person spends every available hour in service to a role, however meaningful, however important, without ever asking what the self underneath the role actually needs. Retirement is the moment that question becomes unavoidable, and the Stoics, who had been asking it deliberately for their entire lives, had answers that are more useful than anything the retirement planning industry has ever produced. Let us begin. 1. The identity you have to rebuild. Imagine a man named Frank. He is 67 years old, a former fire chief from a mid-sized city in Ohio who spent 38 years in a profession that did not just employ him, but defined him in the most fundamental way a profession can define a person. He was the chief. Everyone knew it. The role carried weight in every room he entered, not because he demanded it, but because the role itself commanded a particular quality of attention from the people around him. He made decisions that saved lives. He led people through the worst moments they would ever experience. He carried a responsibility so specific and so serious that it organized everything: his sleep, his eating, his relationships, his sense of what a day was for. And then he retired. The ceremony was genuine. The respect was real. The department he had served honored him with the kind of send-off that reflected 38 years of genuine leadership. And the next morning he woke up and did not know what to do with himself before 9 o'clock. Not dramatically, not in crisis, just quietly, persistently, without anyone to tell. Lost. He tried filling the hours. Golf, which he had always said he would take up. Projects around the house. Lunch with former colleagues who were still working and whose conversations kept returning to the job he was no longer part of. Nothing landed, not because retirement was bad, but because Frank had retired from a role without asking what he was retiring into. He had a plan for the money. He had no plan for the self. Now let us go to ancient Rome. To a man who faced a version of Frank's crisis, not at the end of his career but in the middle of it, and who developed a philosophy of identity that has never been more relevant than it is for the person sitting in Frank's armchair at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning with nowhere to be. Seneca was forced into retirement, not by age or by choice, by Nero, the emperor he had served as tutor and advisor for years, who decided, for reasons that mixed paranoia with politics, that Seneca's influence had become inconvenient and that he should withdraw from public life. Seneca was at the height of his powers, sharp, connected, influential. The withdrawal was not his choice, and it was not gentle. And what he did with that forced retirement, how he thought about it, how he reframed it, how he used it, produced some of the most important writing in the Stoic tradition. He wrote to his friend Lucilius, "Vindicata tibi, reclaim yourself for yourself, not for the role, not for the institution, not for the colleagues who still needed him, or the students who still sought his counsel, or the version of himself that the public world had constructed over decades of visible, consequential work. For himself." And then he added something that Frank needed to hear, and that every person in retirement needs to sit with. Omnia aliena sunt, tempus tantum nostrum est. Everything else belongs to others. Time alone is ours. Frank had spent 38 years giving his time, his finite, irreplaceable, non-renewable time, to a role that deserved it and used it well. And now, for the first time in his adult life, the time was his, not his absence, as presence, as the thing that Seneca spent his entire career arguing was the only real wealth available to a human being, and that most people discover only when the external structures that consumed it are finally gone. Frank eventually found his way to a question that reframed everything. Not, what should I do with my time, but who do I want to be with my time? Not the chief. The chief was retired. Frank, the actual Frank, the person who had existed before the badge and would continue after it. Who was he? What did he value when the role was not doing the valuing for him? What did he care about when the care was not organized by professional obligation? It took him longer to answer that question than he expected. But the answer, when it came, was more specific and more his own than anything the role had ever given him. He started volunteering with a youth mentorship program, not because it was useful, though it was, but because the specific combination of his experience, his patience, and his genuine interest in young people who were making the decisions that would shape their lives. That combination was something only Frank could bring, not the chief. Frank. And the young people in that program did not care about his title. They cared about him. Here is the first principle. Retirement is not the end of your identity. It is the beginning of the first identity that is entirely your own. The role gave you structure, purpose, and a daily answer to the question of who you were. Now you have to answer it yourself, not with busyness, not with a schedule that mimics the working years without their meaning. With the honest, patient, sometimes uncomfortable work of finding out who Frank is when Frank is not the chief. That person has been there the whole time. Retirement is simply the first extended opportunity you have ever had to meet them properly. 2. The purpose that does not retire. Now meet a woman named Helen. She is 63 years old, a retired pediatric nurse from a hospital in Edinburgh, Scotland, who spent 31 years doing work that she loved with a completeness that most people never find in a profession. She did not just like nursing. She was called to it in the specific way that certain people are called to certain work, where the match between who you are and what you do is so precise that the work feels less like labor and more like expression. And now it is over. Not because she wanted it to be. The retirement was medically advised, a back injury that made the physical demands of ward nursing no longer sustainable. She did not choose to leave. She was moved out by a body that had finally said enough. And the grief of that, the specific, unacknowledged, socially invisible grief of losing work you loved before you were ready to lose it, is something Helen has been carrying alone for 18 months, because nobody told her she was allowed to grieve it. Retirement is supposed to be a celebration, a reward, the thing you worked toward and finally reached. Nobody gave her the language for the version that felt like loss. Now let us travel to ancient Athens, to a man whose entire productive life was organized around a purpose so specific and so consuming that when the city of Athens tried to take it from him, with a trial, a conviction, and a death sentence, he refused to abandon it, even to save his life. Socrates did not retire, not because he lacked the means or the opportunity, but because what Socrates did, the questioning, the examining, the relentless pursuit of honest understanding, was not a job he held. It was the expression of who he was. He said at his trial, in words that Plato recorded and that have survived 2,500 years, "The unexamined life is not worth living." He was not being dramatic. He was being precise. The examination, the daily, deliberate, uncomfortable practice of asking honest questions about how to live and who to be, was not something Socrates did for Athens or for his students or for posterity. He did it because it was the fullest expression of his nature, because the person he most authentically was could not exist without it. And this is what Helen needed to understand about her grief. She was not grieving the job. She was grieving the daily expression of something essential in her nature, the care, the presence, the specific way she moved through the world when she was doing the work she was built for. The job was the container. The purpose was what lived inside it. And the purpose does not retire when the job does. It simply needs a new container. Epictetus wrote in a formulation that is both simple and radical, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." What would Helen be? Not what would she do, not what role would she fill. What would she be? Present, caring, attentive to the specific needs of people who were frightened or in pain, or simply needed someone to see them clearly. That is what she would be. And that expression, that particular combination of qualities that made her exceptional at nursing, was not inside the hospital. It was inside Helen. She eventually found her way to a palliative care volunteering program, not as a nurse. Her registration had lapsed, and her back would not permit the physical demands, but as a visitor, a presence, someone who sat with people in their final weeks and brought the exact quality of attention that 31 years of pediatric nursing had built into her at the cellular level. She was not nursing, she was being Helen, and the people she sat with received something that no professional role could have provided. The presence of a person who was there not because the job required it, but because it was the fullest expression of who she was. Here is the second principle. Your purpose did not retire when you did. It was never inside the role. It was inside you. The role was the container that organized it. The container is gone. The purpose remains. Find a new container, not a replacement career, not a busyness schedule that mimics the working years. Ask honestly, what was I actually being when I was doing my best work? Not what was I doing, what was I being? And then find the places, however different from the career they look, where you can be that again. The purpose that made your work meaningful is still available to you. It is simply waiting for a new address. 3. The freedom. The Stoics spent their lives trying to reach. Imagine a man named Leonard. He is 71 years old, a retired professor of economics from a university in Toronto who spent 42 years in a profession that rewarded intellectual rigor, careful argument, and the particular kind of authority that comes from being the expert in the room. He was the expert in the room for 4 decades. He is not the expert in the room anymore. And this, more than the loss of the salary, more than the loss of the structure, more than the loss of the daily intellectual stimulation that academic life provided, is what Leonard struggles with most. He is not needed in the specific way he was needed. His opinions, which carried weight in lecture halls and conference rooms and policy discussions for 40 years, now land in a world that has largely moved on to the next generation of experts. He feels, and this is the word he uses when he is being honest with himself, irrelevant. And he has been trying with the same analytical rigor he brought to his academic work to argue himself out of that feeling. It is not working, because the feeling is not an argument and it cannot be defeated by one. Now let us go to the outskirts of ancient Rome, to the final years of a man who had served in one of the most visible, consequential, and intellectually demanding positions available in the ancient world, and who had chosen voluntarily to leave it. Seneca retired from Nero's court not only when Nero forced him out, but, in the years before that forced withdrawal, had been arguing for his own retirement with an emperor who did not want to release him. He wanted out, not because the work was beneath him, but because he had come to understand something that took him decades to learn. The visible, consequential, intellectually demanding position was also a cage. A gilded one, a meaningful one, a cage that many people would have chosen over freedom, but a cage nonetheless. He wrote in one of his most personal letters, "Recede into ipsa quantum potes." Withdraw into yourself as much as you can, not as retreat, not as defeat, as arrival. The freedom that Seneca spent his career describing, the freedom that Epictetus had found inside slavery, that Marcus had tried to maintain inside empire, was the freedom of a person who was no longer required to be anything in particular for anyone else's purposes. That freedom is what retirement offers, and most people spend the first years of it trying to recreate the cage, filling the schedule, staying busy, finding ways to remain needed, to remain relevant, to remain the expert in a room somewhere, because the alternative, the actual alternative, the freedom that Seneca was describing, feels, from the inside of a life organized around external validation, like emptiness. It is not emptiness, it is space. And space, interior space, the kind that only becomes available when the external structures that consumed it are finally gone, is the condition for the only kind of life the Stoics considered genuinely worth living. Leonard eventually stopped arguing with the feeling of irrelevance, not by accepting it, by examining it. He asked himself, with the honesty that 42 years of intellectual rigor had made possible, what exactly the irrelevance was threatening, and what he found when he looked directly at it was not his identity. It was his ego, the specific, constructed, publicly validated version of himself that the academic world had built over 4 decades. That version, the expert, the authority, the person whose opinions moved rooms, was genuinely retired, and underneath it, once Leonard stopped defending it, was something he had not visited in a very long time. Curiosity, raw, unperformed, nobody is watching curiosity about things that had nothing to do with economics or policy or professional expertise. He started learning to paint, not well, not with any intention of being good at it, but with the specific pleasure of a person who is doing something purely because it interests them, with no audience, no evaluation, no external measure of success. He took a class in ancient history, not to teach it, to learn it. He read novels for the first time in 30 years, not the carefully selected books that would have been useful to his professional work, but the ones that simply seemed interesting. He was, for the first time in 4 decades, learning without performing. And the pleasure of that, the specific, quiet, unwitnessed pleasure of a mind that is moving because it wants to rather than because it has to, was something he had not experienced since before the career consumed him. Here is the third principle. The freedom retirement offers is not a problem to be solved with busyness. It is the condition the Stoics spent their entire working lives trying to reach. Stop trying to recreate the cage. Withdraw into yourself, not as retreat but as arrival. Find out what your curiosity reaches for when it is no longer organized by professional obligation. Follow it, without performance, without audience, without the need for anyone to confirm that what you are doing is worthwhile. It is worthwhile because you find it worthwhile. That is enough. That has always been enough. 4. The relationships that finally have room. Now meet a woman named Dorothy. She is 68 years old, a retired school head teacher from a suburb of Birmingham in England, who spent 35 years managing the organized complexity of a large secondary school with the particular combination of warmth and authority that great school leaders develop over decades of genuinely caring about children and the people who teach them. She was excellent at relationships in her professional life. She is discovering in retirement that she was less excellent at them everywhere else, not because she did not love her husband of 40 years, not because she was not devoted to her 3 adult children or her 5 grandchildren, but because the relationships outside work had been maintained for 3.5 decades on whatever was left after the school had taken what it needed, which was often not much. And now, the school has released her. And Dorothy is in her house with her husband, a retired accountant who has been home for 3 years and who has developed in those 3 years a life and a rhythm and a daily structure that does not naturally include another person in the house all day, and they are discovering each other again, not always comfortably, because the relationship they had for 35 years was organized around absence, around the dynamic of 2 busy people who loved each other and passed in the morning and reconnected in the evening and managed, across decades of parallel busyness, to maintain something real. And now they are not passing in the morning. They are sitting at the same breakfast table with the same coffee and the entire day ahead of them. And it is wonderful, and it is difficult, and nobody prepared them for either. Marcus Aurelius wrote, in a passage that reads, less like philosophy and more like a man reminding himself of something he kept forgetting. When you wake up in the morning, think about the precious privilege of being alive, of breathing, of thinking, of enjoying, of loving. Loving, not managing, not maintaining, not the careful, scheduled, around-the-edges love that busy lives produce. The actual thing, the presence, the attention, the time, not the leftover time, the actual time, that love requires to become what it is capable of being. Epictetus wrote, "He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has." Dorothy had, sitting across from her at the breakfast table, 40 years of shared history with a person she had chosen and kept choosing through everything that history contained. She had, living within driving distance, 3 adult children whose lives were happening right now. Not in the future when she would have more time, but right now. She had 5 grandchildren who were growing at a rate that would make this particular version of them, this exact age, this exact collection of enthusiasms and questions and small hands, available for approximately 10 minutes in the span of a lifetime. She had, in the freedom that retirement had returned to her, the time to be actually present for all of it. Not scheduled presence. Not the presence of a person who is there in body, but somewhere else in mind, because the school needed her attention. Full presence. The kind that the working years had made impossible and that retirement had made available. If she was willing to stop mourning the structure she had lost long enough to receive the gift that had replaced it. Dorothy and her husband started having breakfast slowly, not as a strategy, not as a relationship intervention, as a daily, deliberate, unhurried practice of being in the same room at the same time, with no agenda except each other. It took months to stop feeling strange, and then it stopped feeling strange and became, quietly and without announcement, the best part of both their days. Here is the 4th principle. Retirement returns something that the working years consumed. Time with the people who matter most, not scheduled time, not the time that remained after everything else had taken what it needed. Real time, unhurried time. Time that is available to become whatever the relationship requires. Conversation, silence, shared experience, the simple, irreplaceable presence of 2 people who have chosen each other over decades and finally have the hours to actually show it. The relationships you maintained on the margins of a busy life are waiting to become something more than that. Give them the time they have always deserved. You finally have it to give. 5. The philosophy. Retirement was always building toward. Finally, there is a man named Arthur. He is 74 years old, and he is what every principle in this video has been building toward. Not because his retirement has been without difficulty, not because he found a system that eliminated the disorientation or the grief or the identity questions that retirement forces every person to face, but because Arthur has been in retirement for 11 years and has done what very few people do. He has used it, not efficiently, not productively in the way his working life measured productivity. He has used it to finally, fully, without apology or performance, become himself. He spent 35 years as a civil servant in London, a career that was meaningful and solid and well executed, and that he does not regret for a single day. He was good at it. He served well. He retired with the quiet dignity of a person who gave what was asked and gave it honestly. And then the real work began. Not the work of filling time, the work of answering the question that retirement had been building toward his entire life. What is a life for? Not his career's life, not the professional version of himself that the civil service had shaped and deployed across 3.5 decades. A life, his life, this one, the one that was still happening at 63 and still happening at 74, and that would continue happening, be in whatever form it took, until it didn't. What was it for? Marcus Aurelius wrote, in the line that Arthur has returned to more times than he can count. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. Arthur stopped arguing. He stopped arguing about whether retirement was what he expected. It was not. He stopped arguing about whether the adjustment was taking longer than it should. It was. He stopped arguing about whether he was doing retirement correctly, whether the mix of activities and relationships and quiet time was the optimal configuration of a life no longer organized by professional obligation. He simply began showing up daily and imperfectly for the life that was actually happening rather than the one he was still planning. He walks every morning, not for fitness, because the morning walk is the closest thing he has found to what Marcus was doing with his private journal, the daily moving unwitnessed practice of clearing the mind and deciding who he intends to be before the day makes the decision for him. He reads every afternoon, not useful books, books that interest him, history, biography, the occasional novel that somebody recommended and that turns out to be exactly what he needed without knowing he needed it. He has lunch with his daughter every Thursday, not as a scheduled obligation, as the specific pleasure of a man who spent 35 years being too busy for Thursday lunches and who has decided, with the clarity that 11 years of retirement have produced, that Thursday lunches with his daughter are among the most valuable hours of his week. He does not always know what his life is for, but he has stopped requiring the answer before he lives it. And Seneca, who spent his final years under the shadow of Nero's eventual death sentence, and who knew, with a specificity most people are spared, that his time was genuinely limited, wrote something that Arthur keeps above his desk. Dum defertur vita transcurrit. While we delay, life passes. Arthur is not delaying. Not anymore. He is here. In his Thursday lunches and his morning walks and his afternoon books and the quiet evenings with his wife of 47 years in a house that is finally, peacefully, fully theirs. He is here, completely, without performance, without the role that used to tell him who he was. Just Arthur. And Arthur, it turns out, after 74 years of becoming, is more than enough. Here is the fifth principle. Retirement is not the end of your story. It is the chapter where the story finally becomes entirely yours. No role to play, no title to fill, no external structure organizing your hours and telling you what your days are for. Just you, with the time, the freedom, and the hard-won wisdom of a life actually lived, finally free to answer the question that the working years kept at a comfortable distance. Who are you when you are not performing for anyone? The answer to that question is the most interesting thing about you, and you have, in the years that retirement offers, more than enough time to find it. We started today in silence, the morning after the card and the cake and the handshake, the alarm that did not go off, the quiet that arrived where 3 decades of purpose had been. and we walked through 5 principles that the Stoics spent their entire lives pointing toward, not as retirement advice, but as the philosophy of a life fully, honestly, and without apology lived. Reclaim yourself for yourself. The role gave you structure and identity, and a daily answer to the question of who you were. Now you have to answer it yourself. That is not a loss. That is the most important work of your life. Your purpose did not retire. It was never inside the role. Find the new container. Be what you were being when you were doing your best work, in whatever form that takes now. The freedom retirement offers is not emptiness. It is the condition the Stoics spent their careers trying to reach. Stop filling it. Inhabit it. Let your curiosity lead without requiring an audience. Give the relationships what they have always deserved and what the working years could never quite spare. The time. The unhurried, undivided, finally available time. And then stop arguing about what this chapter should look like. Begin living it, imperfectly, without a plan that accounts for everything. Just begin. Marcus Aurelius wrote by lamplight to himself and across time. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. You have earned this time, not to fill, to inhabit, not to manage, to live. The version of you that exists on the other side of the role, quieter, freer, more entirely yourself than you have ever been allowed to be, is waiting, not in a plan, not in a schedule, not in the perfect retirement that you have been told you deserve. In the ordinary, unhurried, completely yours Tuesday morning that is already here. Take it. Take care of your mind. The world will take care of itself. Until next time. If this video gave you a way of seeing retirement that nobody else has given you, not as an ending, but as the chapter where the real story finally begins, subscribe to this channel. Next week we go deeper into the Stoic principles that help you build a life that is genuinely, completely, and without apology your own. Subscribe now so you never miss what comes next. And if someone in your life is navigating retirement and struggling to find their footing, share this video with them. Sometimes the most important thing you can give someone is the permission to stop performing and start arriving.